I never expected the boy I fed scraps from my lunchbox to one day become the man who locked me inside his penthouse and whispered that he had loved me for 15 years. My name is Aisha Thompson, and this is how it started in the cold Chicago winter of 2009. I was 21, working 2 jobs just to keep my tiny apartment and send money back to my mom in Atlanta. Every evening after my shift at the downtown diner, I walked past the same alley near the L train. That's where I first saw him, Gi-hoon, a skinny 19-year-old Korean immigrant who had arrived with nothing but a student visa that had already expired. He was huddled under a cardboard box, shivering, eyes hollow from hunger. I stopped, heart twisting. "Hey, you hungry?" I asked, voice soft, so I wouldn't scare him. He looked up, surprised anyone would speak to him. I pulled out the leftover fries and half a burger I was taking home and handed them over. He ate like a man who hadn't tasted food in days. When he finished, he wiped his mouth with the back of his hand and said in broken English, "Thank you. One day, I rich. I marry you." I laughed, thinking it was just the sweet nonsense of a starving kid. "Sure, Gi-hoon, when you're rich, come find me." I gave him my name and the address of the diner. Oh, he nodded like it was a blood oath. That night, I went home wondering why one small act of kindness felt so heavy. Little did I know it would change both our lives forever. For the next 3 months, Gi-hoon became my shadow. He showed up at the diner every night after closing, waiting in the alley until I brought him whatever leftovers I could sneak. We talked. Him practicing English, me learning a few Korean words. He told me how his parents had died in a factory fire back in Seoul and how he came to America chasing the dream everyone talks about. America is land of opportunity, he said, eyes bright for the first time. But opportunity cost money. I shared my own story. Single mom, absent dad, working since I was 16 just to survive. One night he grabbed my hand, his palm rough from street life. "Atsya, you kind to me when world cruel. I never forget. When I rich, I marry you. Promise." I smiled, touched but realistic. "Gi-hoon, you don't owe me anything. Just stay safe." But something in his voice made me believe he meant every word. Then one freezing February night, he didn't show up. Instead, he left a note taped to the diner door. "I go make rich. Study hard. Work hard. Come back for you. Wait for me, Aisha." Mi-hoon. My heart dropped. I kept the note in my wallet for years. Life moved on. I finished community college, got a better job at a marketing firm, dated a few guys who never lasted. Every time someone asked about my type, I'd laugh and say, a tall, rich, and Korean long story. But inside, I wondered if that hungry boy had made it or if the streets had swallowed him. 15 years later, I was 36, still in Chicago, now senior account manager at a mid-sized firm. I had my own place in Lincoln Park, a cat named Pepper, and a quiet life. Then everything shattered. My company was bought out by some faceless conglomerate. I was restructured out the door with 2 weeks severance. Bills piled up. My mom's medical bills from her diabetes got worse. One night, walking home from a temp gig, a black SUV pulled up beside me. 2 men in suits stepped out. Miss Thompson, you need to come with us. It's for your safety." Before I could scream, they had me in the car, doors locked, windows tinted black. My heart hammered. Was this a kidnapping? Human trafficking, I thought, but they were too strong. The SUV drove me to a glass tower overlooking Lake Michigan, the kind of building I'd only seen in magazines. They took me up in a private elevator straight into a sprawling penthouse that looked like a luxury hotel. Marble floors, floor-to-ceiling windows, art worth more than my entire life. The door clicked shut behind me with an electronic lock. I was trapped. Panic rose until a familiar voice spoke from the shadows. "Aisha, you waited." I spun around. There he stood, taller, broader, dressed in a tailored black suit that screamed power. Gi-hoon, but not the boy I remembered. This man had sharp cheekbones, cold eyes, and an aura that made the air feel heavy. "Gi-hoon," I whispered. He stepped closer, voice low and dangerous. "I'ma call me JH now, CEO of Han Global, and you're mine to protect." He told me the truth in pieces. While I was scraping by, Gi-hoon had clawed his way up, first cleaning offices at night, then coding apps in a tiny room, then building a tech empire that swallowed competitors whole. Rumor said he had connections in the shadows, ruthless deals that made him feared in boardrooms and back alleys alike. A mafia king in a suit, some whispered. Tonight he had learned that my name was on a list. Creditors, ex-boyfriend with gambling debts, people who wanted to use me to get to him. I locked you in here because outside you're not safe, he said, eyes burning. I made a promise 15 years ago. I intend to keep it. I backed away, heart racing. You can't just kidnap me and call it love, Ji-hoon. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I'm not the boy you fed anymore. But the promise still stands. Days blurred inside that golden cage. He brought me clothes, food, everything I could want, except freedom. We argued. I screamed that kindness wasn't a debt to be collected like this. He listened, silent. Then one night he showed me something that cracked my anger. A worn, faded photo in his wallet. Me handing him that first burger, captured by a street camera he had paid to retrieve years later. Every time I wanted to give up, he said, voice cracking for the first time, I looked at this. Your kindness was the only good thing in my world. It taught me to fight for something bigger than survival. The twist hit me like a freight train. Ji-hoon wasn't just rich. He had become ruthless because the world had been ruthless to him. But my one small act of humanity had planted a seed. He built hospitals in Seoul, funded scholarships for immigrant kids, all in secret. I locked the door because I was scared to lose the only person who ever saw me as human. He confessed, but I will open it if you want to walk away. I just needed you to know I never forgot. Tears burned my eyes. The ruthless CEO, the man they called a king in the underworld, was still that hungry boy at heart. The emotional storm broke on the 7th night. I stood at the window watching the city lights when he walked up behind me. Nopse, your kindness saved me. Now let me save you. Marry me not because I'm rich, but because I have loved you every single day since you fed a stranger. I turned, searching his face. The cold mask was gone. All I saw was the boy who had promised, the man who had never stopped believing. I realized then that one sandwich, one moment of compassion had rippled across 15 years and 2 lives. I whispered, yes. He pulled me into his arms, the lock on the door finally clicking open, not with a key, but with truth. We walked out of that penthouse together the next morning, hand in hand, into a new chapter. Gi-hoon kept his empire, but softened its edges. I went back to my career on my own terms, helping other struggling kids the way I once helped him. Our wedding was simple, family, friends, and a table full of burgers as a joke only we understood. The world watched the ruthless CEO marry the woman who once fed him, and for once the headlines were kind. Because sometimes the smallest act of humanity grows into the greatest love story. And in the end, we both became richer than any money could measure. Rich in the kind of love that starts with a simple "you hungry?" and never ends. The morning after I said yes, the city of Chicago felt different. Sunlight poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse as Ji-hoon, now officially J.H. to the world, but still my Gi-hoon in the quiet moments, stood beside me with a simple black coffee in his hand. He had already ordered breakfast, scrambled eggs, fresh fruit, and yes, a side of fries that made both of us smile at the memory. No more locked doors. The electronic click that had once terrified me now sounded like freedom when he pressed the button to open the private elevator. "The day we start again," he said softly, his voice carrying that slight Korean accent that had never fully left him, even after years of boardroom English. No more cages, Aisha, only us. We stepped out into the crisp April air together, my hand in his. The black SUV waited, but this time the doors opened because I chose to get in, not because 2 suited men forced me. Ji-hoon gave the driver an address I didn't recognize, a quiet neighborhood on the south side where my old diner still stood, faded but somehow still open after all these years. "Want to see it again," he told me as the car moved through traffic. The place where everything began. As we drove, he began to talk, really talk, for the first time without the weight of his empire pressing down. He told me about the years I had wondered about him. After leaving that note on the diner door, he had slept in shelters for 2 weeks, then found a job washing dishes in a Korean restaurant in Koreatown. The owner, an older man named Mr. Park, took pity on him and let him sleep in the storage room. During the day, Ji-hoon studied coding at the public library, teaching himself from free online tutorials on ancient computers that crashed every hour. At night, he worked until his hands bled from hot water and steel wool. He saved every dollar. When he had enough, he bought a cheap laptop and started building small apps, simple tools for immigrant communities to translate documents, find cheap housing, connect with legal aid. One of those apps caught the eye of a small venture capitalist who gave him his first real investment. That was the beginning of Han Global, but success didn't come gently. Ji-hoon described the betrayals, the competitors who tried to steal his code, the investors who pulled funding when they learned he was an undocumented kid with no family name. He learned to fight back, sometimes with lawyers, sometimes with shadows he never fully explained. I became someone people feared, he admitted, looking out the window at the passing buildings, because fear was the only thing that kept them from taking everything again. But every night, no matter how many millions I made, I opened my wallet and looked at that photo of you handing me the burger. It reminded me why I was doing any of this. The SUV pulled up in front of the diner. It looked smaller than I remembered. Peeling paint on the sign, the same cracked sidewalk where I used to stand on my brakes. Gi-hoon stepped out first, then offered me his hand like a gentleman from another era. Inside, the smell of grease and coffee hit me instantly. The same cracked vinyl booths, the same jukebox that hadn't worked since 2012. An older black woman named Marlene, who had worked there longer than I had, looked up from behind the counter and nearly dropped her coffee pot. Aisha Thompson? Girl, is that you? And who is this tall drink of water? Gi-hoon bowed slightly, old Korean habit, and said, I'm Ji-hoon, the boy Aisha fed many years ago. Marlene's eyes widened. She remembered the stories I used to tell about the hungry Korean kid in the alley. She laughed loud and warm, the kind of laugh that fills a room. Well, I'll be damned. Sit down, both of you. On the house today. We slid into the same booth where I used to count my tips. Ji-hoon ordered 2 burgers with extra fries and a chocolate shake for me, just like the leftovers I used to bring him. As we ate, he reached across the table and took my hand. This place, it was my university, not Harvard or Stanford. This booth, your kindness. That is what taught me how to build something that lasts. While we sat there, unexpected visitors started arriving. First came a group of young immigrants. Korean, Nigerian, Mexican, who worked in the neighborhood. They had heard rumors that the mysterious CEO of Han Global was in the old diner. One of them, a teenage girl named Sophia, approached shyly. Mr. Han, I use your translation app every day for my mom's doctor appointments. Thank you. Ji-hoon didn't brush her off like the powerful man he was supposed to be. He stood up, shook her hand, and asked her name and her dreams. When she said she wanted to study medicine but her family couldn't afford it, he pulled out his phone right there and made a call. Within minutes, his assistant was arranging a scholarship interview. The girl cried. I watched Ji-hoon's face soften in a way the world rarely saw. That afternoon, we didn't go back to the penthouse right away. Instead, Ji-hoon asked the driver to take us to the alley where I first found him. It was cleaner now. Someone had planted a small community garden, but the memory still lived there. He stood exactly where he had been that winter night, tall and powerful in his tailored coat, and closed his eyes for a long moment. I was ready to die here, he said quietly. A cold, hungry, no one caring if I disappeared. Then you appeared like an angel with fries and a smile. One small decision by you changed the direction of my entire life. I spent 15 years trying to become worthy of that moment. We walked slowly through the neighborhood, hand in hand, and he told me more stories. How he had quietly funded the renovation of this very alley into a safe space for homeless youth. How he had bought the building that housed the old shelter where he once stayed and turned it into a free tech training center. I never put my name on any of it, he explained. Because the boy who received kindness didn't want praise. He just wanted to pass it forward. I felt my heart expand with every revelation. The ruthless Mafia king the newspapers whispered about was also the man who remembered what it felt like to be invisible. As evening fell, we returned to the penthouse. Not as prisoner and captor, but as 2 people learning each other again. Gi-hoon cooked for me that night simple Korean food his mother used to make before the fire took her. Japki noodles, bulgogi, kimchi that he had flown in fresh from Seoul. We ate on the balcony overlooking the lake, the city lights sparkling below like stars that had fallen to earth. He told me about the darker parts of his journey too, the deals that kept him awake at night, the enemies he had made, the times he had to choose between mercy and survival. I became hard because the world was hard, he said, voice low. But you were the proof that hardness is not the only way. I shared my own 15 years. The relationships that never worked because I kept comparing every man to a promise made by a starving boy. The nights I wondered if he was alive or dead. The quiet pride I felt every time I helped someone at the marketing firm who reminded me of him. Young, ambitious, fighting against the odds. I never stopped believing you would come back, I admitted, even when it hurt to hope. That night we didn't sleep much. We talked until the sky turned pink with dawn, filling in the gaps of our separate lives. He showed me the private room in the penthouse where he kept every small thing connected to me. A copy of the note he left on the diner door, framed. Screenshots of my old social media posts from years ago. Even the employee records from the diner that listed my shifts so he could time his returns perfectly when he finally came back to Chicago. It should have felt obsessive, but instead it felt like the deepest kind of devotion. A man who had built an empire from nothing had never let go of the one person who showed him humanity when he had none. The next few weeks became a beautiful blur of rediscovery. Gi-hoon insisted on giving me space, so I returned to my apartment in Lincoln Park for a while. He didn't follow or pressure me. Instead, he sent small, thoughtful gifts. Fresh flowers with handwritten notes in both English and Korean, books by authors I loved, and once a box of my favorite diner fries delivered warm at midnight with a note that simply said, "Still hungry for you." We dated like normal people, or as normal as a global CEO and the woman he once promised to marry could be. He took me to quiet restaurants where no paparazzi waited, to jazz clubs on the South Side where we danced slowly to old songs, to the Art Institute where we stood in front of paintings for hours talking about beauty and pain and second chances. One evening he surprised me with tickets to Atlanta so I could see my mom. When we arrived at her small house, she took one look at Gi-hoon, tall, handsome, clearly successful, and pulled him into a hug that lasted a full minute. "So you're the boy my daughter couldn't stop talking about all these years," she said, eyes shining. "Thank you for keeping your promise." Gi-hoon, the man who commanded billion-dollar deals without blinking, actually got teary-eyed. He spent the whole weekend helping her around the house, fixing the leaky faucet, carrying groceries, and listening to her stories about raising me alone. Watching them together healed something deep inside me I didn't know was broken. Back in Chicago, the world started noticing us. Headlines appeared. Mysterious CEO of Han Global spotted with Chicago marketing executive. Some articles dug into my past, calling me the woman who fed a future billionaire. Others whispered darker things about Gi-hoon's connections. He protected me from the worst of it, but he never hid the truth. "If they come for me," he said one night as we lay together watching the lake, "I will face it, but I will never let them touch you again." His love was fierce, protective, sometimes overwhelming, but it was also gentle in the moments that mattered most. There were challenges, of course. His business demanded long hours and secret meetings he couldn't always explain. I had my own career to rebuild after the layoff. I started a small consulting firm focused on helping minority-owned businesses tell their stories. Gi-hoon became my first client, quietly directing millions into community projects while letting me lead the campaigns. We argued sometimes about his lingering tendency to control situations for my safety, about my stubborn independence that sometimes pushed him away. But every argument ended the same way, with him pulling me close and whispering in Korean the words he had learned just for me, "Sarangi, Shas, I love you." 6 months after that first morning of freedom, Gi-hoon took me back to the penthouse balcony where so much had changed. The city stretched out below us, alive and breathing. He got down on one knee, not with a massive diamond that would have been easy for a man like him, but with a simple silver ring engraved with tiny fries on the inside. 15 years ago, I promised I would marry you when I was rich," he said, voice thick with emotion. Today I am rich in every way that matters because of you. Aisha Thompson, will you be my wife? Not because of money or power, but because your kindness taught me how to love? I laughed through happy tears, the same laugh I had given him in that freezing alley so long ago. Yes, Ji-hoon, I will marry you. The wedding was everything we both needed it to be, intimate yet meaningful. We held it in a renovated community center in the neighborhood where we first met. No lavish ballroom, no celebrity guests, just family, old friends from the diner, young people from the tech training center, and Marlene serving burgers alongside fancy catering. My mom walked me down the aisle. Gi-hoon wore a traditional Korean hanbok jacket over his suit as a nod to his roots. When the officiant asked if he took me as his wife, he answered clearly in both English and Korean, his eyes never leaving mine. After the ceremony, we danced under string lights in the courtyard. Kun spun me slowly, his hand warm on my waist. Do you remember what I said the first night? He murmured against my hair. I'll marry you when I'm rich. I smiled up at him. You kept your promise and so much more. A life after the wedding settled into a rhythm that felt like home. We split our time between Chicago and Seoul, where Gi-hoon introduced me to the city of his birth. He showed me the rebuilt factory site where his parents had worked, now turned into a memorial park with scholarships in their names. We visited orphanages and schools he supported quietly. In those places, I saw the full circle of the kindness I had given a starving boy, how it had multiplied into opportunities for hundreds, maybe thousands of others. There were still shadows. Business rivals tried to use our relationship against him. Once, a tabloid ran a story claiming I was only with him for the money. Ji-hoon wanted to destroy them legally and otherwise, but I asked him to let it go. Let them talk, I said. You know the truth. One burger and one promise started all of this. That's stronger than any headline. He listened. That was one of the biggest changes in him. Learning that power didn't always mean control. He still carried the ruthlessness when his company or our safety required it, but with me, he was the gentle man who remembered hunger and cold and loneliness. We built a life that honored both sides of him. The king who protected what was his and the boy who never forgot the hand that fed him. Years passed. We had a daughter, beautiful, strong-willed with my smile and his determined eyes. We named her Ji-yeon, meaning a beautiful kindness. From the time she was old enough to understand, we told her the story, not the polished version for interviews, but the real one. How her father was once a hungry boy in an alley, how her mother stopped to help, how a simple act grew into a lifetime of love and purpose. Gi-hoon never stopped working, but he changed how he worked. Han Global launched initiatives that helped immigrants start businesses, provided legal aid for those fighting deportation, and created tech programs in underfunded schools across America and Korea. I continued my consulting, focusing on stories that mattered: Black-owned businesses, women lifting their communities, immigrants chasing the same dream Ji-hoon once had. One crisp winter evening, many years after our wedding, we found ourselves back in that same alley near the L train. It was snowing lightly, just like the night we met. Gi-hoon pulled me close inside his long coat. "Oh, look what your kindness built," he whispered, gesturing to the thriving neighborhood around us. The community garden, the training center lights still on late, the diner still serving warm food to whoever needed it. I leaned my head against his chest, listening to the steady heartbeat of the man who had once been so close to breaking. "We built it together," I said. "You kept your promise, Gi-hoon." And I kept believing. He kissed the top of my head the same way he would kiss our daughter goodnight. In that moment, under the falling snow, with the city humming around us, I felt the full weight and beauty of our journey. From a freezing alley and a half-eaten burger to this, 2 lives intertwined, a family, a legacy of compassion. That kept growing. The boy who promised "I'll marry you when I'm rich" had returned as a powerful CEO, but more importantly, he had returned as the man who never forgot the value of one small, selfless act. And I, the girl who simply couldn't walk past someone in need, had found a love deeper and more enduring than any fairy tale. Our story didn't end there. It continued in quiet mornings with coffee, in late-night talks about dreams and fears, in the way we taught our daughter to see the humanity in every stranger. It lived in the scholarships awarded, the businesses launched, the lives changed because one person once chose kindness over indifference. And through it all, Gi-hoon and I walked side by side, two ordinary people who proved that sometimes the greatest empires are built not on ruthless ambition alone, but on the foundation of a single moment when someone decided to care.